Malaysia's finance minister has delivered the nation's biggest budget as it prepares to move to an endemic phase in its fight against COVID-19. The coronavirus fund will receive a top-up of more than $5 billion. The health ministry is getting a boost to nearly $8 billion, of which almost $500 million will be used to buy vaccines for children.
Kerajaan akan terus mengutamakan aspek kesihatan awam bagi membina daya tahan negara dalam persediaan kita ke fasa endemik COVID-19. Bajet 2022 menyediakan 32.4 bilion ringgit kepada Kementerian Kesihatan untuk perbelanjaan mengurus dan pembangunan. Sebagai kerajaan yang mementingkan kesejahteraan rakyatnya, peruntukan bagi Kementerian Kesihatan adalah yang kedua terbesar selepas Kementerian Pendidikan.
Melissa Goh joins us live from Kuala Lumpur. Mel, how will the government be spending this record amount of money?
Well, Steve, given that the focus of budget in next year is going to be on how to nurse the country and the people back to health after a devastating pandemic that infected over 2.4 million people. Now, more than 500,000 are now unemployed. Lots were dished out for the lower income group, especially those making less than $600 a month. Now, over 400,000 households are now living below the poverty line, and those with kids are getting extra help as well. One-off $500 and so on. Now, education received the highest allocation of over $10 billion, followed by healthcare that's been understaffed, underfunded all these years. Now, almost $8 billion. That's the highest allocation so far to beef up the public healthcare system, to future-proof against the pandemic. SMEs and the micro SMEs are as well. They've been languishing during the lockdown. Additional grants, soft loans, credit guarantees worth almost $10 billion have been allocated, some at zero interest, to help them get back on their feet. But all sounds very good on paper. It boils down to implementation. How quickly they can be executed will depend on how soon it gets passed in Parliament here. Intense negotiations will be going on between the government and the opposition over the next 2 weeks to ensure the bipartisan support over, before it comes up for a vote. And Prime Minister Ismail Sabri, who's ruling with a slim majority in Parliament, will be counting on opposition support to sail through the confidence vote, because failure to pass the budget is tantamount to losing confidence on the floor.
Yeah, and Mel, of course, the question will be about where the funds are coming from. Tell us about Malaysia's financial position if it doesn't strengthen as planned.
Well, given that the government has already rolled out 8 stimulus packages since last year, worth over $120 billion, it's really taxing on its coffers, with a whopping $80 billion now being allocated for next year. Now, that's $10 billion more than this year. It's the biggest budget in history. And I expect it to continue to stretch the fiscal deficit to 6% of GDP next year. Now, this year is 6.5% of fiscal deficit. Now, Finance Minister Zafar Aziz, during his 2-hour-long budget speech, spoke about raising revenues through new taxes like sugar and nicotine tax and new digital tax. Although there is no windfall tax, the government is taxing companies that making huge profit this year. That's a one-off 33% tax on profit exceeding 100 million ringgit or $24 million. Now, the government will also be borrowing more to finance the budget. Now, the Economic Affairs Minister was here earlier. Mustafa Mohamad said, there's no cause for concern. The government, he said, can still borrow by issuing bonds and so on. Let's take a listen to what Mustafa had to say earlier.
Oh, well, borrowing is a must, of course, with a deficit of 6.5% this year, 6 next year. Obviously, a deficit means you have to borrow, but most of the borrowing is coming from domestic sources. Almost 100% of the borrowing is coming from domestic sources. There's ample liquidity in the system. It's not an issue at all.
Now, although the government has already raised the country's national debt ceiling beyond 60%, allowing the country to borrow more, but the economist from the opposition, Wong Chen, tweeted saying that has raised concern because of the high cost for debt servicing the country will have to bear, more than $40 billion, and that's more than the entire allocations for the public healthcare system.
All right. Many thanks for that. Mel Goh speaking to us from Kuala Lumpur.